Humiliated in front of a crowd, he carries silence as his only answer, until the impossible happens before everyone's eyes, changing everything forever. The sun rose slowly over Crestview, painting the pastures golden as far as the eye could see. Jack Bennet walked across the yard of his modest property, his bare feet familiar with every stone of the packed dirt ground. At 52, his face carried the furrows left by time and sun, but his brown eyes maintained an intensity that few could decipher. The silence around him wasn't an absence of sound to Jack. It was a personal symphony he had learned to read in the gestures of the wind, the vibration of animal footsteps, the movement of tree leaves. His deafness, present since he was 7 after a high fever, had become his greatest teacher, showing him ways to perceive the world that people with hearing could never imagine. Thunder waited for him in the corral, his bay coat gleaming under the morning light. The animal, imposing and muscular, raised his head upon sensing his owner's approach. There was a silent communication between them, built over 12 years together. Jack extended his hand, and the horse came to him, allowing a touch to his neck. "Good morning, old friend," murmured Jack, though the words came out imprecise from his mouth. Thunder whinnied softly, a sound that Jack felt more than heard, through vibrations that reached him. The morning routine proceeded as always, checking the other animals, fixing a loose fence, feeding the chickens. Jack worked with the precision of someone who knew every corner of his land. He had inherited those 5 acres from his father, along with the responsibility of maintaining a family tradition of horse breeding that went back 3 generations. Around 9 o'clock, he spotted Ryan's small figure running down the dirt road. The 11-year-old boy came with an animated face, waving from afar. Ryan had lost his parents in an accident when he was only 4 and had been living under Father Michael's care at the parish house ever since. He was a smart, curious boy who had won the heart of the entire community with his natural kindness. Mr. Jack," Ryan shouted, though he knew the man couldn't hear him. When he got close, he began to gesture with his hands, using the basic ASL signs he had taught himself through videos on the school's internet. "Good morning, how are you?" the boy signed, smiling. "Good morning, Ryan. I'm well," Jack replied, his eyes lighting up with the boy's presence. Ryan was one of the few people who made the effort to learn his language. "Father Michael sent this for you," Ryan indicated, pulling a yellowed envelope from his backpack. Jack took the correspondence with curiosity. It wasn't common to receive letters. Upon opening it, he found a formal invitation printed on quality paper, with the Bradford Ranch emblem stamped at the top. It was an invitation to the grand riding tournament that Dr. Charles Bradford would organize next month. His expression closed as he read the words. He knew well the intentions behind that seemingly cordial invitation. Dr. Bradford had bought the best lands in the region in recent years, becoming the richest and most influential rancher in Crestview. He was a man who never missed an opportunity to flaunt his superiority, especially over those he considered inferior. "What is it?" Ryan asked, noticing the change in the man's expression. Jack showed him the invitation. The boy read in silence, frowning. "He's challenging you," Ryan observed, indignant. "Everyone knows he doesn't like you." It was true. Dr. Charles Bradford had never hidden his contempt for Jack. He considered him a folkloric figure, a man who raised a horse famous for its bravery, but who had never proven capable of riding it. In his social circles, it was common to make jokes about the mute and his untamable horse. "I won't go," Jack signed, tucking the invitation into his shirt pocket. "Why not?" Ryan insisted. "You and Thunder are special. I know you can show everyone." The man looked at the boy with affection but shook his head. Over the years, he had learned to avoid conflicts, to keep away from the spotlight and provocations. His peace came precisely from isolation, from the simple life he had built away from others' judgments. But Ryan didn't give up easily. He spent the rest of the morning trying to convince Jack, using arguments ranging from justice to pride. He talked about how the man was respected by animals, how he had a special gift, how he deserved everyone's recognition. "You don't need to prove anything to anyone," Jack finally signed, "but sometimes we need to prove things to ourselves." These Words echoed in the boy's mind as he watched Jack resume his activities. There was something in the man's gaze that Ryan couldn't completely decipher, a mixture of hurt, determination, and a deep secret that he seemed to have carried for many years. In the afternoon, when Ryan said goodbye to return to town, Jack was left alone with his thoughts. He walked to the corral where Thunder grazed peacefully and leaned on the wooden fence. The invitation was still in his pocket, a constant weight reminding him of a lifetime of imposed silences and lost opportunities. The wind shook the trees around, creating dancing shadows on the ground. Jack closed his eyes, feeling the breeze on his face, and for the first time in many years, allowed himself to imagine what it would be like to climb onto Thunder's back in front of a crowd, proving to everyone that his silence was more eloquent than any word. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like. Tell us which city you're watching from. We continue. Dr. Charles Bradford adjusted his leather hat as he walked through his ranch facilities, supervising preparations for the tournament. At 45, he was a tall, imposing man with a well-trimmed mustache and always impeccable clothes. He had built his empire through astute agribusiness deals and never missed an opportunity to demonstrate his financial superiority. "Dr. Bradford," called Tommy, his foreman, approaching with a clipboard in hand. "We already have 15 confirmed registrations. The best riders in the region will participate." "Excellent," replied Dr. Bradford, satisfied. "And that special invitation I sent?" Tommy hesitated for a moment. "Well, sir, I delivered it to Father Michael to take to Jack Bennett, as you requested, but I don't know if he'll accept." "He'll accept," stated Dr. Bradford with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Pride speaks louder than prudence, especially when provoked in front of the entire town. The rancher had planned that tournament with a very specific objective. In recent months, he had made a purchase offer for Jack's land, offering a considerable amount for the small property that bordered his lands. The refusal had been polite but firm, communicated through Father Michael, who served as an intermediary in more serious matters. For Dr. Bradford, that refusal was more than a commercial obstacle. It was a personal affront. How dare a simple man like Jack Bennett refuse his generous offer? The deaf man's property was strategic for his expansion plans, and he wasn't accustomed to hearing no as an answer. "Tommy, I want you to spread around town that the tournament is open to all interested parties," instructed Dr. Bradford, walking toward his office, "especially to those who think they have special horses." The foreman understood the hint. In no time, comments about the mute and his untamable horse began circulating through the bars, fairs, and gatherings in town. It was exactly what Dr. Bradford wanted, to create social pressure that would force Jack to participate. Meanwhile, at the parish house, Father Michael was talking with Ryan about the situation. The priest was a kind 60-year-old man who knew both Jack and Dr. Bradford well. He knew the intentions behind the tournament and worried about the consequences. "Ryan, my son, you need to understand that sometimes it's better to avoid conflicts," the priest was saying, serving milk and cookies to the boy. "Jack is a prudent man. He knows what he's doing. But Father Michael, you didn't see how Mr. Jack looked when he read that invitation," argued Ryan, stirring his milk with a spoon. "He was sad, but also, how can I explain? Like something woke up inside him." The priest sighed. He had known Jack since childhood, since before the boy became deaf. He had witnessed the transformation of that communicative, full-of-life boy into the quiet, reserved man he had become. He knew that behind that apparent resignation were wounds that had never completely healed. "Tell me something, Ryan," said the priest, sitting next to the boy. "Why did you learn sign language?" The boy blushed slightly. Because Mr. Jack is special. He understands animals in a way nobody else does, and I wanted to understand him too." "And can you communicate with him?" "Yes, he teaches me about horses, about nature, about how to be patient. He never spoke, but I feel he's suffered a lot in life." Father Michael nodded thoughtfully. Ryan had touched on a sensitive point. Jack's story was more complex than most people imagined. The priest kept secrets about the man's past, secrets that might explain his special relationship with horses and his resistance to participating in competitions. In the late afternoon, Ryan returned to Jack's property. He found him in the corral, brushing Thunder with smooth, repetitive movements. The horse remained calm, as if that ritual were a shared meditation between them. "How is he today?" Ryan asked, approaching slowly. "Restless," Jack replied, without stopping brushing. "He senses when I'm troubled." "Is it because of the tournament?" Jack stopped for a moment, looking at the horizon where the sun was beginning to set. "Ryan, do you know why I've never ridden Thunder in front of other people?" The boy shook his head, curious. "Because some things are sacred," explained Jack. "The trust between us doesn't need an audience to exist." "But what if people understood? What if they saw how special you are together?" Jack smiled sadly. "People only see what they want to see, Ryan. To them, I'm just the deaf man who can't tame his own horse." "Are you afraid?" The question caught Jack by surprise. He stopped brushing Thunder completely and looked at the boy with intensity. "I'm not afraid of riding Thunder," he finally answered. "I'm afraid of what might happen afterward." "After what?" "After people discover the truth." Ryan frowned, not completely understanding what those words meant. There was something in Jack's gaze that suggested layers of history the boy didn't yet know. That night, as Ryan returned to town, he couldn't stop thinking about the conversation. What truth was Jack afraid to reveal? Why would a man so talented with horses keep himself hidden from the world? At Bradford Ranch, Dr. Bradford was finalizing the tournament details, confident his plan was working. Through his contacts, he had already spread rumors about a special prize for whoever could do what Jack never managed to do: mount and control Thunder for more than a minute. He didn't know he was about to awaken something that had slept for many years in the heart of a man who carried secrets capable of changing the entire history of Crestview. The news of the tournament spread through Crestview like wildfire. In the town square at the market, in conversation circles after church, the subject dominated all discussions, and invariably Jack Bennett's name would come up, accompanied by bets, laughter, and comments mixing cruelty with curiosity. "I bet he won't even show up," said old Bill at the general store, surrounded by other residents. "Someone who's never managed to ride his own horse isn't going to risk embarrassing himself in front of everyone." "But what if he succeeds?" questioned Martha Lewis, the town's midwife. "You've all seen how that horse obeys only him. There's something different about their relationship." "Different or not, it's one thing for an animal to respect its owner, another to be ridden in a competition," retorted old Bill. "Those are completely different things." Sarah Williams, the elementary school teacher, listened to the conversation in silence while buying groceries. At 32, she was one of the few people with higher education in town and had always been bothered by how some residents treated Jack. She knew his communication limitations, but recognized his intelligence and sensitivity. "Excuse me," Sarah interrupted, addressing the group. "Have you ever stopped to think that maybe Jack has his reasons for not riding Thunder publicly? Not everything in life needs to be a spectacle." "Teacher, with all due respect," responded old Bill, "but a working man who doesn't ride his own horse becomes a joke. That's how things work around here." Sarah shook her head, disappointed, and finished her shopping in silence. She knew that mentality was hard to change, but she felt there was injustice in the judgment they made of Jack. Meanwhile, at the parish house, Father Michael was receiving an unexpected visit. Emma Harrison, an elegant 50-year-old woman who had recently returned to Crestview after decades living in the capital, knocked on his door with a worried expression. "Father Michael, I need to talk to you about Jack Bennett," she said, using his full name. The priest invited her in, serving coffee in the simple living room. Emma was the daughter of one of the region's most traditional families, but had left to study medicine in Columbus when she was young and had only now returned to care for her elderly mother. "I heard about the tournament Dr. Bradford is organizing," Emma continued, nervously fidgeting with her purse strap. "And I also heard that Jack received an invitation." "Yes, it's true," confirmed the priest. "I'm concerned about the intentions behind this invitation." Emma took a deep breath before continuing. "Father, do you know Jack's complete story?" Father Michael hesitated. As a confessor and spiritual advisor, he kept many secrets of the community. "I know what he's told me over the years. Why do you ask?" "Because I was here when it all happened. I was 16 when Jack lost his hearing. But there were more things happening at that time, things that might explain why he never wanted to participate in competitions." The priest leaned forward, interested. Emma had rarely spoken about the past during the months since her return. "Jack wasn't just an ordinary boy who became deaf," Emma began. "He was considered a prodigy with horses. Even as a child, he was already riding animals that grown men couldn't control. His father, Mr. Thomas, was the best horse trainer in the region and had taught his son techniques that came from previous generations of the family." Father Michael listened attentively, some pieces of the puzzle beginning to fit together. "When Jack got sick and lost his hearing, something else happened," continued Emma, her voice laden with emotion. "He had been invited to participate in a state competition in Columbus. He was very young, but his talent was recognized throughout the region. The family had invested everything in that opportunity. And what happened? With the deafness, he withdrew completely, stopped riding in public, stopped competing, practically stopped relating to people. His father was devastated, not because his son had become deaf, but because he believed he had lost a unique opportunity to show the world the family's gift." Emma paused, wiping away a discreet tear. "Mr. Thomas spent years trying to convince Jack to return to riding publicly, but the boy refused. He said people would see him only as the deaf boy trying to ride, never as the talented horseman he truly was." "That explains a lot," murmured the priest. "There's more," said Emma. "Before I left for the capital, Jack and I were close. We weren't officially dating, but there was an understanding between our families. I should have stayed, should have supported him during the transition, but I was very young and scared by the situation." Father Michael began to understand the complexity of the situation. "And now you've returned, and now I see he's built a life based on isolation, on protecting his dignity through silence. But I also see that this has prevented him from showing the world who he really is." At that moment, Ryan came running to the parish house, interrupting the conversation. The boy was agitated, his face red from exertion. "Father Michael!" "Miss Emma," he greeted breathlessly, "I need to tell you something important." "What is it, my child?" asked the priest. "I went to Mr. Jack's property this morning and he wasn't there. I asked the neighbors and they said he left very early with Thunder on foot, leading the horse by the reins." Emma and the priest exchanged concerned looks. "And do you know where he went?" asked Emma. "To Whispering Hill," Ryan replied. "Mrs. Wilson said she saw them climbing the trail at dawn." Whispering Hill was a special place for Jack, a place he went when he needed complete isolation to think. It was there that he had learned to reconnect with horses after becoming deaf, away from the judgmental eyes of the town. "He must be making a decision about the tournament," observed Father Michael. Emma stood up, determined. "I need to talk to him before he decides anything. There are things he needs to know, things that could change his perspective on all this." While the three discussed the situation high on Whispering Hill, Jack was sitting on a rock, watching Thunder graze freely in the clearing. The wind tousled his graying hair as he contemplated the view of the town below, small and distant, as his problems seemed from up there. In his hands, he held the crumpled tournament invitation, knowing a decision needed to be made. But what? He didn't know was that this decision would trigger events that would reveal secrets kept for decades and change not only his life, but that of several people in Crestview. The trail leading to Whispering Hill was steep and rocky, but Emma climbed it with determination, accompanied by Ryan, who had insisted on showing the way. Father Michael had decided to stay in town, respecting the privacy of what he knew would be a necessary moment between the two. "There," Ryan pointed when they reached the top, indicating the clearing where Jack was sitting. "He always comes here when he needs to think." Emma felt her heart race at the familiar silhouette. Even after so many years, even with the grey hair and wrinkles marked by time, she recognized every movement, every gesture of the man she had loved in her youth. "Ryan, can you wait down here?" she gently asked. "I need to talk to him alone." The boy nodded, understanding the importance of that moment, and sat on a rock to wait. Emma took a deep breath and walked slowly toward the clearing. Jack had his back to her, completely focused on watching Thunder. The horse was the first to notice her approach, raising his head and looking in her direction with curiosity. That's when Jack turned around. Time seemed to freeze for an instant. His brown eyes widened in surprise and immediate recognition. Emma saw in that gaze a mixture of emotions: joy, pain, surprise, and something that seemed to be relief. She waved gently, not knowing if he still remembered the basic signs they had created together as teenagers. To her surprise, he responded with a simple but meaningful gesture, pointing to his own heart, and then to her, a way they used to say, "I missed you." Emma felt her eyes fill with tears and walked up to him. When they met in the center of the clearing, they remained silent for long moments, just looking at each other, recognizing each other after decades of separation. "Emma," he spelled, with his hands slowly, as if testing whether she still understood. "Jack," she responded the same way and smiled to see his face light up. "You came back," he signed, still incredulous. "I did," she confirmed, sitting on a nearby rock. "I came back to take care of my mother, but also because I felt it was time to come home." Jack approached and sat beside her, maintaining a respectful but significant distance. Thunder, sensing that the tension had diminished, went back to grazing peacefully. "Why did you come looking for me?" he asked. Emma hesitated, organizing her thoughts. There were so many things to say, so many explanations to give, so many years to make up for. "I heard about the tournament," she began, "and I remembered how you were with horses before everything changed." Jack's face closed slightly. "That was a long time ago. I'm different now." "No," she denied vehemently. "You're still the same person. I've seen how Thunder respects you, how other animals react to you. The gift didn't disappear, Jack. The gift is useless if people only see the disability," he replied, bitterness evident in his gestures. Emma moved closer, gently touching his arm. "I left," she signed, tears finally streaming down her face. "I left when you needed me most. I was a coward and selfish." Jack looked at her with surprise. Throughout all those years, he had believed she left because she couldn't handle his new condition, that she was ashamed of him. "No," he signed. "You had to live your life. It was right." "It wasn't right," she protested. "I loved you, Jack, truly loved you, but I was very young and scared, and my parents didn't understand. They thought your deafness was a problem that would complicate our future." These words hit Jack like a punch to the stomach. For decades he had carried the pain of rejection, believing he wasn't worthy of love because of his disability. "Did you marry?" he asked, trying to change the subject. "Yes," she admitted. "I married in Columbus, had a daughter, but the marriage didn't last. He never understood why I always talked about Crestview, why I kept mementos from here." "And your daughter, her name is Julie. She's 28, a veterinarian. She's coming to visit me next month." Emma smiled while talking about her daughter. "I always wanted to bring her here, to show her where I grew up." They talked for another hour, recovering pieces of their stories, filling in gaps left by years of separation. Emma told about her career as a pediatrician, about the challenges of life in the capital, about how she always felt incomplete away from her roots. Jack, in turn, shared about his simple life, about how he had learned to find peace in silence, about his special connection with animals. "Why have you never ridden Thunder publicly?" she finally asked. Jack looked at the horse, then at his hands, organizing his thoughts. "Because when I ride, when we connect," he explained slowly, "it's something sacred, intimate, and I knew people would see only the spectacle, not the truth of what happens between us." "And what is that truth?" He hesitated, then stood up and made a gesture to Thunder. The horse immediately stopped grazing and approached. Jack placed his hand on the animal's neck and closed his eyes. "When I go deaf to the world," he signed without opening his eyes, I can hear him, not with my ears but with something deeper. We communicate without words, without sounds. It's as if my deafness allows me a communication that hearing people cannot have. Emma watched, fascinated at that unique connection. It was true. There was something almost magical in the way man and horse related to each other. "That's why you're afraid of the tournament," she observed. "I'm afraid people won't understand," he admitted. "I'm afraid they'll transform something beautiful into just another competition." Emma stood up and stood in front of him, forcing him to look her in the eyes. "What if you showed them exactly that?" she challenged. "What if, instead of hiding your special connection with thunder, you used it to teach people that there are different forms of communication, different ways of being complete?" Jack looked at her intensely, as if seeing a possibility he had never considered. "You think I should participate?" "I think you should do what your heart tells you," she replied. "But I also think Crestview needs to learn that a person's value isn't measured by the absence of limitations, but by the presence of unique talents." As they descended the trail back to town, accompanied by Ryan, who had waited patiently, Jack carried in his chest a sensation he hadn't felt for decades, the possibility of being understood and accepted exactly as he was. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like. Tell us which city you're watching from. We continue. 3 days after the meeting on Whispering Hill, Jack walked through the streets of Crestview with a determination he hadn't felt in a long time. In his hands, he carried a sealed envelope. Ryan accompanied him, anxious and curious, sensing that something important was about to happen. The first stop was the parish house. Father Michael received them on the porch where Emma was having breakfast. Her presence had become constant in the priest's life, helping with her mother's care and rediscovering her place in the community. "I've made my decision," Jack signed, handing the envelope to the priest. Father Michael carefully opened the document. It was the tournament registration form, filled out in firm handwriting and signed. Emma smiled, her eyes shining with pride and expectation. "Are you sure about this, Jack?" asked the priest aloud, so Emma could also follow. "I am," Jack replied. "But I won't participate for the reasons Dr. Bradford expects." "What do you mean?" asked Emma. "I'll participate to show that silence can be the most eloquent of languages," he explained. "I'll show that thunder and I have a communication that goes beyond words." Ryan practically jumped with joy. "I knew it. I knew you would. Participate." "Ryan," said Father Michael, "would you like to take this registration to Dr. Bradford?" The boy took the envelope as if carrying a treasure and ran off toward Bradford Ranch. His excitement was contagious, and soon other residents noticed that something important was happening. At the ranch, Dr. Bradford was supervising the construction of the bleachers when Tommy came running. "Dr. Bradford, Ryan is here with a registration." Dr. Bradford smiled with satisfaction. His plan was working exactly as expected. When Ryan handed over the envelope, he made a point of opening it in front of several employees. "Look at that," he said loudly. "Jack Bennett has accepted our special invitation." The employees exchanged glances among themselves. Some seemed genuinely curious, others clearly doubtful about Jack's chances. "Sir," Tommy said hesitantly, "are you sure this is a good idea? What if he actually manages to ride the horse?" "Doctor." Bradford laughed loudly. "Tommy, I've raised the best horses in the region. I know all the talented riders from here to Columbus. If Jack Bennett could ride that horse, he would have done so in public a long time ago." What Dr. Bradford didn't know was that his arrogance was about to be confronted by a force he neither understood nor respected. The news spread through the town like a wildfire. At Old Bill's general store, the subject dominated all conversations throughout the entire day. "I can't believe he actually registered," said Martha Lewis, shaking her head. "Is age affecting the poor man's judgment? Or maybe he really can." "Ride and never showed anyone," suggested Sarah, the teacher, who had joined the conversation. "Sarah, with all due respect," retorted Old Bill, "but a wild horse doesn't turn tame just because the owner is special. Either he knows how to ride or he doesn't. There's no middle ground." Sarah sighed, tired of that limited mentality, but decided not to argue. There was something in Jack's posture in recent days that intrigued her. He seemed more confident, more determined. At school during recess, even the children talked about the tournament. Ryan had become a kind of spokesman for Jack, defending him with passionate arguments. "You don't understand," he explained to a group of classmates. "Mr. Jack isn't like other riders. He talks to Thunder in a way nobody else knows how." Talks. "How, Ryan?" asked one of the girls, skeptical. "He's deaf and the horse doesn't speak." "There are conversations that don't need words," replied the boy, repeating something he had learned from Jack. "There are ways to communicate that are deeper than speech." Meanwhile, at Jack's property, Emma had become a constant visitor. She watched fascinated at his routine with the animals, rediscovering the man she had fallen in love with in her youth. "Are you nervous?" she asked one afternoon while watching him brush Thunder. "Not exactly," he replied. "I'm expectant." Expectant. How? Jack stopped brushing and looked at her intensely. Expectant to show that there's beauty in what people consider a defect. Expectant to prove that true communication goes beyond physical limitations. Emma approached him, gently touching his face. "You've changed," she observed. "How so?" "When we were young, you always wanted to prove you were normal despite your deafness," she explained. "Now, you want to show that you're special because of it." Jack smiled, a genuine smile that Emma hadn't seen in decades. Maybe that's the difference between youth and maturity. When we're young, we want to fit in. When we mature, we learn that our value lies exactly in what makes us unique. That night, Father Michael received an unexpected call. It was Julie, Emma's daughter, calling from Columbus. "Father Michael, my mother gave me your number. I'd like to arrive earlier for my visit. I heard there's a special event happening there." "That's good, my child. Your mother will be very happy." "Father, my mother told me about Jack Bennett, about their past and about the tournament. As a veterinarian, I'm very curious about his special connection with horses." Father Michael smiled. "Then you'll have the opportunity to see something very special. Jack is an extraordinary man. I'll be there tomorrow, and Father, and take good care of my mother. She seems to be reliving an important part of her life." When he ended the call, Father Michael reflected on how events were unfolding. There was a feeling in the air, an expectation that went beyond the simple tournament. It was as if the whole town was about to learn an important lesson about judgments, prejudices, and the true meaning of ability. The next day, Julie arrived in Crestview driving a modern car that attracted attention in the small town. She was a beautiful woman, with dark hair like her mother's, but with a confident and professional posture that reflected her training in the capital. The meeting between mother and daughter was emotional, but Julie quickly made it clear that she was eager to meet Jack Bennett, about whom she had heard so much over the years. When they were finally introduced, Julie was impressed with Jack's serene presence and the way he communicated. As a veterinarian, she immediately recognized something special in his relationship with Thunder. "May I examine him?" she asked in sign language, surprising everyone with her fluency in the language. "You know sign language?" Jack asked, surprised. "I learned in college," she explained. "I always wanted to communicate better with deaf people who might bring animals for treatment." That simple demonstration of respect and preparation deeply touched Jack, who for the first time in decades felt truly understood by someone outside his intimate circle. Julie spent the entire morning observing the interaction between Jack and Thunder, making discreet notes in a notebook. As a veterinarian specializing in animal behavior, she recognized communication patterns that went far beyond the ordinary. "May I ask some technical questions?" She signed to Jack, after observing him work with the horse for almost 2 hours. "Of course," he replied, curious about the young woman's professional interest. "How did you develop this form of communication with him?" Jack hesitated, organizing his thoughts. It was difficult to explain something that had happened naturally over the years. "When I lost my hearing," he began, "I also lost the ability to use traditional vocal commands with horses. I had to find other ways." "And how was that process?" "At first it was frustrating. I tried to use the same methods my father had taught me, but without being able to hear the sounds I made or that the horse responded with, everything seemed wrong. Julie nodded, taking notes. And then? Then I started paying attention to things I had never noticed before. The animal's breathing, muscle tensions, micro-movements. I discovered that horses communicate primarily through body language, not sounds. That's fascinating, observed Julie. In veterinary medicine, we call this advanced interspecies communication. It's rare to see someone develop this level of connection naturally. Emma, who was watching the conversation in silence, felt her heart fill with pride. She was seeing Jack Bennett being recognized for his unique abilities, something she had always known he deserved. Mom. Julie turned to Emma. Did you know that what Jack does is considered exceptionally rare, even among professionals in the field? Emma smiled. I always knew he was special. That afternoon, as they walked back to town, Julie made an unexpected proposal. Jack, I'd like you to consider an idea, she said. I have contacts at the State Veterinary University. They would be fascinated to study your technique of communication with horses. Jack stopped walking, surprised. Study how? Document your methods. Maybe develop a training program based on your techniques. This could help other handlers and veterinarians, Julie explained, excited. You've developed something unique that could benefit many people. Never thought about that, admitted Jack. It's something to consider after the tournament, suggested Emma, one thing at a time. Meanwhile, at Tewint Bradford Ranch, Dr. Bradford was receiving important visitors. They were investors from the capital interested in his agribusiness. During lunch, he couldn't resist telling them about the tournament and about the spectacle he was preparing. You'll be entertained, he said, serving more wine to the guests. I invited a quite peculiar local character, a deaf man who never managed to ride his own horse, but who thinks he's capable of competing with the best riders in the region. The investors laughed, but one of them, Dr. Robert Matthews, seemed bothered by the comment. Charles, does this man have any intellectual disability besides deafness? He asked. No, he's deaf, not mentally incapacitated. Why do you ask? Because if he's just deaf and still raises horses, he must have developed interesting compensatory skills. You might be underestimating him. Dr. Bradford dismissed the suggestion with a gesture. Robert, I know all the talented horsemen in this region. If he had real ability, he would have demonstrated it by now. Or perhaps, observed Dr. Matthews, he simply never had the right opportunity to demonstrate. The conversation left Dr. Bradford slightly irritated. He didn't like when someone questioned his judgments, especially on matters he considered his domain. That night at the parish house, Emma, Julie, and Father Michael talked about recent developments. There's something I need to tell you, said Emma, looking nervous. Something about the past that might be important to fully understand Jack. Father Michael and Julie paid attention. When Jack was young, before becoming deaf, he wasn't just talented with horses, Emma began. He came from a special lineage. His grandfather, his great-grandfather, they were all known for having an almost mystical connection with animals. What do you mean? Asked Julie. The family always said it was a gift that passed from generation to generation. They called it the silent conversation, the ability to communicate with horses in a way others couldn't. Father Michael nodded slowly. I remember hearing stories about Jack's grandfather. They said he could calm wild horses just with his presence. And Jack inherited this, continued Emma. But when he became deaf, everyone, including me, thought he had lost that ability along with his hearing. But actually, observed Julie, the deafness might have intensified his gift. Without the dependence on auditory commands, he developed purer forms of non-verbal communication. Exactly, agreed Emma. What we all saw as a limitation may have actually been what allowed him to fully develop the family gift. Father Michael reflected on that revelation. This changes a lot about how we understand Jack's story, and explains why he's always been so reserved about riding thunder publicly, added Julie. He knew he had something special, but didn't want it to be seen as curiosity or spectacle. Emma nodded. Jack has always been very protective of things he considered sacred. The next day, With only 3 days left until the tournament, Jack woke up with a different feeling. He had dreamed of his grandfather, an imposing figure who had passed away when he was still a child. In the dream, his grandfather told him, "Silence isn't the absence of communication, boy. It's the purest form of it." When Ryan arrived for his morning visit, he found Jack in the corral, not just brushing Thunder, but for the first time in years preparing a saddle. "Mr. Jack," exclaimed Ryan, excited, "are you going to train for the tournament?" "I'm not going to train," Jack signed, carefully adjusting the saddle straps. "I'm going to reconnect." "Reconnect with what?" "With who I really am," he replied, and for the first time in decades climbed onto Thunder's back. What happened next was magical. Horse and rider moved as if they were a single entity in perfect harmony. There was no struggle, no domination, just a silent and elegant dance that seemed to defy the laws of nature. Ryan watched with tears in his eyes, knowing he was witnessing something extraordinary. And at the property gate, without anyone noticing, Dr. Bradford was also watching, for the first time in his life, completely speechless. The day of the tournament dawned clear and windy, with a cloudless blue sky stretching over Bradford Ranch. From the early morning hours, cars and pickup trucks arrived from neighboring towns, bringing competitors, families, and curious onlookers who had heard about the special event. Dr. Bradford supervised the final preparations with a mixture of anxiety and confidence that he himself couldn't completely explain. The image of Jack riding Thunder the day before haunted him, but he forced himself to believe that what he had seen was a coincidence, a moment of luck that wouldn't repeat itself under pressure. "Sir," said Tommy, approaching with a clipboard, "we already have 22 registered competitors. The bleachers are almost full. And Jack Bennett. He hasn't arrived yet, but he sent confirmation through Ryan that he'll be here." Dr. Bradford nodded, trying to maintain his composure. In the background, he saw Dr. Matthews and other investors chatting animatedly, clearly curious about the special competitor he had told them about. At Jack's property, the morning had passed in contemplative silence. Emma and Julie had arrived early to accompany him, and the three watched as Jack prepared Thunder with ritual care. "How are you feeling?" asked Emma. "At peace," he replied, slowly brushing the horse's mane. For the first time in many years, completely at peace. Julie observed the preparation with a professional eye. "He's calmer than you are," she commented, referring to the horse. "He always gets calm when he knows something important is about to happen," explained Jack. "Horses sense our intentions even before we fully understand them ourselves." Ryan arrived running, wearing his best clothes for the occasion. "Mr. Jack, there's already a bunch of people at the ranch. Everyone's asking if you're really going to show up." "Let's go," signed Jack, finalizing the preparations. The procession to the ranch was emotional. Jack walked beside Thunder, followed by Emma, Julie, Ryan, and, to everyone's surprise, Father Michael, who had decided to attend to support his parishioner. When they arrived at the entrance to Bradford Ranch, a murmur spread through the crowd. Many people were seeing Thunder up close for the first time, and the horse was truly impressive. He was majestic, with defined muscles and a presence that commanded respect. Dr. Bradford approached the group, forcing a cordial smile. "Jack Bennett, good to see you came. I was anxious to see you compete." Jack merely nodded politely without responding. His attention was focused on calming Thunder, who seemed slightly restless with the crowd and loud sounds. "The rules are simple," continued Dr. Bradford, speaking loudly enough for others to hear. "Each competitor has an opportunity to ride and control their horse for at least 1 minute. Whoever demonstrates the best control and harmony with the animal wins." The tournament began with the youngest and most inexperienced competitors. Some achieved respectable performances, others had visible difficulties. The crowd reacted with applause or sympathetic murmurs according to each presentation. Sarah, the teacher, had strategically positioned herself near Jack's group. She noticed how he respectfully observed each competitor, showing no arrogance or judgment. "He's studying the techniques of the others," she observed to Emma. "No," Emma corrected. "He's respecting everyone's effort. Jack has always been like that, able to see merit in others' attempts." As the more experienced competitors entered the arena, the level of the presentations improved significantly. Veteran riders demonstrated impressive techniques, drawing enthusiastic applause from the audience. Dr. Matthews, the investor who had questioned Dr. Bradford earlier, observed everything with growing interest. When he saw Jack and Thunder, he whispered to the colleague beside him, "That man and that horse have something special. You can see it in the way they position themselves in relation to each other." Finally, it was Jack's turn. The announcer called out, "Next competitor, Jack Bennett riding Thunder." An expectant silence fell over the crowd. Hundreds of people leaned forward in the bleachers. Cell phones were raised. Conversations ceased. Jack walked to the center of the arena, leading Thunder by the reins. The horse walked calmly, but his muscles were tense, ready for action. When they reached the center, Jack stopped and looked around. For the first time in decades, he was the center of attention, being observed by hundreds of people. But instead of anxiety, he felt a deep calm. He looked at the bleachers and saw Ryan waving encouragingly, Emma with tears of pride in her eyes, Julie making discreet notes, Father Michael with his hands in a prayer position. Then, slowly, Jack approached Thunder. He placed his hand on the animal's neck and closed his eyes for a moment. The connection between them was visible even to the most skeptical observers. Unhurriedly, without spectacle, he climbed into the saddle. What happened? Next left the entire crowd in absolute silence. Thunder didn't rear up, didn't run uncontrollably, didn't try to throw the rider. Instead, he began to move with a grace and elegance that seemed almost supernatural. Horse and rider moved around the arena as if they were a single entity. There was no struggle, no domination, just a silent and perfect dance that hypnotized all present. 1 minute passed, then 2, then 3. The crowd remained silent, as if any sound could break the spell of that moment. Dr. Bradford watched in disbelief. His arrogance had completely disappeared, replaced by reluctant admiration that he struggled not to show. When Jack finally dismounted from Thunder after 5 minutes of impeccable performance, the crowd exploded in applause. These weren't just applause of technical recognition. They were applause of pure emotion, from people who had witnessed something truly extraordinary. But the tournament was far from over. Dr. Bradford, realizing that his public humiliation was approaching, made a desperate decision that would change everything. "Very impressive," he shouted to the crowd. "But our tournament has a special rule for exceptional cases. When a performance is questionable, any competitor can challenge the result." The crowd murmured in confusion. This rule hadn't been mentioned previously. "I challenge Jack Bennett to a final competition," declared Dr. Bradford. "Him against me, riding my best horse. If he really has skill, let him prove it by riding an animal he doesn't know." The silence that followed was tense and loaded with expectation. Everyone looked at Jack, waiting for his response. Then something unexpected happened. A voice rose from the crowd, clear and decided. "I accept the challenge on his behalf." Everyone turned to see who had spoken. It was Emma, standing in the bleachers, with a determination that surprised even herself. Emma's declaration echoed through the arena like thunder. The crowd murmured in confusion. How could she accept a riding challenge on Jack's behalf? Dr. Bradford laughed nervously. "Miss Emma, with all due respect, the competition is between working men, not—" Charles. "Bradford!" Emma interrupted him, her voice carrying an authority that made the entire arena fall silent. "There are things about this family that you never knew, and today is the time for the truth to come out." She descended from the bleachers with determination, followed by Julie and Father Michael. When she reached the center of the arena, she stood beside Jack, who looked at her with surprise and concern. "What are you doing?" He signed. "Correcting a 30-year mistake, hon," she replied, and then turned to the crowd. "Crestview," shouted Emma, her voice reaching every corner of the arena. "You know Jack Bennett as the deaf man who never rode his horse in public, but there's a story that was never told." Dr. Bradford tried to intervene. "Emma, that's beside the point." "No, it isn't," she retorted. "Jack Bennet isn't just a man with a special gift for horses. He's the last direct descendant of the Bennet lineage, the family that founded the riding tradition of this region." A murmur of surprise ran through the crowd. Father Michael nodded, confirming Emma's words. "His great-grandfather John Bennet was the one who taught the first riding techniques to the settlers of this land," continued Emma. "His grandfather, Anthony Bennet, was considered the best horse trainer in the entire state." Jack looked at Emma with a mixture of surprise and emotion, realizing where she was going with this. "And Jack," Emma raised her voice even more, "didn't lose his ability when he became deaf. He enhanced it. He developed a form of communication with horses that his ancestors only dreamed of achieving." Dr. Bradford was visibly uncomfortable. "These are just stories." "They're facts," interrupted Julie, joining her mother. "As a veterinarian, I can attest that Jack has developed animal communication techniques that are considered revolutionary in academic circles." Then Emma did something that surprised even Jack. She approached Thunder and, to everyone's amazement, placed her hand on the animal's neck. "And there's one more truth that needs to be revealed," she said, her voice now softer but still audible throughout the arena. "Jack taught me the fundamentals of this communication when we were young. I also know how to talk to horses." The crowd was in absolute silence. Dr. Bradford opened his mouth to protest, but the words didn't come out. Emma looked directly at Jack. "Do you forgive me for keeping this secret for so long?" She signed. "What secret?" he asked, confused. "That I never stopped training. Throughout all these years away from here, I kept alive the technique you taught me. I rode horses in Columbus, participated in amateur competitions, always remembering what I learned from you." Tears ran down Jack's face as he understood what Emma was revealing. "You mean that I never forgot you or your family or your traditions," she completed, "and that if Dr. Bradford wants a real competition, he'll have one." Dr. Bradford, realizing he had completely underestimated the situation, tried to back down. Perhaps it's not necessary." "Oh, but it is necessary," said Dr. Matthews, the investor, rising in the bleachers. "Charles, you challenged their ability. Now you need to honor your word." The pressure from the crowd and the investors forced Dr. Bradford to maintain the challenge. He brought his best horse, Emperor, an imposing animal but known for his docility, with experienced riders. Emma approached the animal with the same calm that Jack had demonstrated with Thunder. To everyone's surprise, Emperor immediately responded to her presence, relaxing and allowing her to approach. The ride that followed was even more impressive than Jack's. Emma demonstrated not only impeccable technique, but a genuine connection with the animal that left even Dr. Bradford in awe. When she dismounted after a perfect performance, the crowd erupted in applause that lasted several minutes. Dr. Bradford approached, finally humble. I apologize. I completely underestimated you both." "I accept your apology," Jack signed. "But I hope you learn an important lesson. A person's value isn't measured by their limitations, but by their unique talents." "Father." Michael approached the group. "Jack, Emma, you've given us a lesson that Crestview won't soon forget." Ryan ran to hug Jack, radiant with joy. "Mr. Jack, everyone saw how special you are." Julie approached her mother, moved. "Mom, I didn't know that you—" "There are many things you still don't know about me," Emma smiled, "but now we have time to discover them together." In the months that followed, life in Crestview changed significantly. Jack became a respected instructor, teaching his techniques to interested young people. Emma decided to stay permanently in town, opening a small veterinary clinic with Julie. Dr. Bradford, transformed by the experience, became one of the biggest supporters of Jack's work, sponsoring a training center that combined traditional techniques with the revolutionary methods developed by the man he had once despised. Ryan grew up as Jack's pupil, developing his own animal communication skills and discovering that he too had the special gift. And Thunder? He continued being the faithful companion he always was, but now also became the patient teacher, of a new generation of riders who learned that true communication goes far beyond words. In the town square of Crestview, where cruel jokes about the mute and his untamable horse were once heard, inspiring stories were now told about the man who taught an entire town that differences can be our greatest gifts. And every time the wind shook the trees in town, people remembered that the deepest silences sometimes carry the most important messages.